It was a quiet time in the galaxy. Not peaceful, not friendly, but quiet, like the silence that hides behind fear. The ancient species ruled everything, from the golden throne of the Vihari Empress to the cold logic of the Cerealian AI collectives. Power had already chosen its masters long ago. The smaller races were just surviving under their control, obedient, fearful, voiceless. The Galactic Council believed they had seen everything. Thousands of years had passed since the last unknown signal came from the stars. They had explored the spiral arms, charted dead planets, even sent ships to black hole borders. They thought they had conquered the unknown. No more surprises. No more first contact drama. According to them, the galaxy was complete. And then one day, something strange happened. A signal appeared. It wasn't a simple radio wave or a message packet. It was something far more complex, fast, deeply encrypted, and unlike anything they had seen before. It didn't follow their standard quantum codes. The signal was not asking for war. It wasn't a threat. But it also wasn't friendly. It was pure information. Massive amounts of it, hidden inside a pulse of light, wrapped in strange mathematics. Not even the Cerealian AI could fully understand it. The Council dismissed it, at first assuming it was just some old data fragment bouncing between stars. But then the signal repeated itself, and this time it responded to the scanners. It shifted shape, adapted. It was alive, somehow thinking. Now they were curious. A probe was quickly sent toward the source, a dead sector known as Gray Reach. That area was useless, full of radiation, gravitational storms, nothing living, nothing of value. But when the probe reached the edges of Gray Reach, it started sending back data that made even the oldest species sit up in shock. The space was not empty. It was scarred. Stars had been burned out in patterns. Planet orbits were broken. Gravity itself was bent in strange ways. There were deep craters and gas giants, something that no weapon known to the Council could do. The probe followed a trail. Energy remnants, magnetic echoes, and faint traces of what could only be described as footsteps, like a massive object had passed through entire solar systems, leaving behind marks that space itself remembered. Then, the probe vanished. 1 second it was there, sending signals, scanning space, and the next moment, silence. Not even its destruction was recorded. It was like it had been erased from existence. Panic didn't come immediately. The Council was still confident. They sent a scout ship with heavy defenses, stronger scanning systems, and even a small war fleet for protection. That ship went deeper into Gray Reach, and it never came back either. Now the fear began. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Council couldn't explain something. A threat had entered their world, and it didn't follow any rule. They knew. But still, they tried to hide the fear. They told the public it was a dark matter disturbance, or some unknown natural force. But then, just a few days later, it arrived. A presence. A gravitational shock. Something massive appeared near the galactic core, outside the Council's capital system. Not close, but close enough that it could not be ignored. It didn't warp in like other ships. It didn't use known space-folding tech. It just appeared. The first thing they saw was the energy reading. No ship, not even the largest dreadnoughts of the Council fleets, carried that kind of power. It was like a small star wrapped in metal. The scanners struggled to understand it. The ship's surface was smooth but not uniform. It had no windows, no markings, no openings. Just a solid, dark shell, moving slowly through space like it owned everything around it. The Council's high satellites zoomed in, trying to get a visual. When they finally focused, what they saw terrified them more than any weapon ever could. The ship was shaped like a dagger, long, silent, with sharp, clean angles that looked less like a ship and more like a sword designed to pierce stars. Its structure bent light. Sensors could barely get a reading. The composition was unknown. No element matched any in the Council's databases. Radiation signatures were off the charts, and there were no life signs aboard. No crew. No command center. No control tower. Just an empty beast of metal and silence. The Council tried to communicate. They sent greetings in every known language. They offered safe harbor. They issued warnings. They even activated defensive satellites. But the ship didn't respond. It didn't even seem to notice them. It just moved. Slowly, silently, it passed through the star systems as if searching for something. Its direction wasn't random. It was following a pattern, heading toward a specific part of the galaxy. The Council traced the trajectory and gasped. It was moving toward Sector 9E, a place long forgotten. A border zone ruled by the Council, but filled with worker colonies and broken worlds. Nothing important, nothing worth visiting. Unless you had heard a signal from there. That's when they checked the historical records. Deep inside the Galactic Archive, in old neglected files, they found it. A signal. A distress call sent 72 years ago by a minor species called the Relari. It was short, broken, and never answered. The Relari were slaves back then. They had rebelled. Once. The rebellion was crushed within a day. Millions were killed. Their planet was scorched, and they were punished so brutally that the event was erased from public memory. But the signal had escaped. It had traveled across dark space, moving past black holes and time waves. And now, all this time, later someone had heard it. Someone had come. A human battleship. The word human itself was unfamiliar to many on the Council. There were only whispers, myths of a primitive species that had destroyed itself or vanished into exile. No confirmed sightings, no official first contact. They were never important, but this ship had come in answer to a call for help. Not from a powerful race, not from an advanced world, from slaves. That's when the fear became real, because this was not a fleet. It was not an invasion. It was just one ship. And already it had walked through their defenses without saying a single word. Some said it was an AI from a lost empire. Others believed it was a weapon from the ancient pre-galactic. War finally awakened. But the older ones, the few historians who remembered the name human, they felt something deeper. This was not a ship made to conquer. This was a ship made to answer pain. Now every eye in the galaxy turned toward Sector 9E. Every camera, every drone, every mind watched as the human battleship moved like a ghost from old nightmares, drawing closer to the broken world of the Relari. The Council had no plan. Their fleets were not ready. Their technology was no match. All they had now was fear, because something had arrived, and they knew. Nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The arrival of the human battleship was like thunder shaking the sky, but without sound. It didn't fire. It didn't speak. It didn't even move fast. And yet every species in the galaxy felt it. Fear didn't come from what it did. Fear came from what it could do, and the fact that no one understood it. Inside the High Council chambers, panic spread like fire. The ancient Vahari Empress, who had ruled for over 5 centuries without blinking, sat in silence for the first time. Her eyes stared at the hologram of the ship, unmoving, almost hypnotized by the cold shape of it. Around her, other council members shouted, argued, fought over what should be done. Some wanted to send a peace signal. Others wanted to raise the defenses. Some demanded a full military response. But none of their voices held any real confidence. They were afraid, and they all knew it. The Cerellian AI clusters processed the ship's data again and again, using quantum mines and probability nets. But the answers were always the same. This ship defies analysis. It was like a nightmare, written in physics. Energy levels beyond logic. Heat signatures that didn't cool, didn't spike, just burned steadily like a star trapped in armor. It had no communication ports, no external weapons, at least none that could be seen. But the density of the ship's body was so intense, even the strongest weapons of the Council might bounce off like stones against a mountain. Then came the next wave of panic. Dozens of probes and drones were sent closer. Some vanished, some exploded without warning, and a few lucky ones managed to send back images, terrifying ones. Strange glowing symbols moved along the surface of the ship like veins under skin. The patterns were alive, shifting in response to scanners. The ship knew it was being watched, and it didn't care. Every protocol was tried. Hundreds of known languages, emergency codes, diplomatic greetings, even ancient forgotten scripts. None were answered. The Council was split. Half believed the ship was a threat. The other half feared that attacking it might be worse than waiting. The Empress finally spoke after hours of silence. Her voice was soft but carried centuries of power. Prepare the fleets, but do not fire first. But it was already too late. The ship had moved again. This time it changed direction slightly, not toward the Council's capital, but closer toward the edge of their controlled space. It was now on a direct path to a system known as Bryn 7. That name meant little to most Council members, until a historian whispered something that changed the room's temperature. That's where the Relari signal came from. Now the fear sharpened into something worse. Guilt. 72 years ago, the Relari had rebelled. Slaves rising against their masters. The Council crushed it in a day. The Empress herself had approved the orbital strikes. Relari cities were reduced to ashes. Their language was banned. Their history deleted. No one had ever spoken of them since, but the Relari, desperate and dying, had sent a signal into space. A final cry for help, not meant to be answered, just a scream into the void. Now, after decades, someone had heard that scream. And they were coming. The message from the human battleship arrived just as the ship passed the midpoint between Council worlds and Relari space. It was not a transmission in the usual sense. It did not use sound or radio. It appeared suddenly on every device, screen, and neural implant across the galaxy, simultaneously. No matter what language, what species, what system, the message came through perfectly. You sent a distress signal. We came. Only that. 9 words. But those 9 words hit the Council like a spear through the heart, because it meant the ship knew the truth. It had received the signal. It had followed it. And it wasn't asking for permission. It wasn't warning anyone. It was simply stating a fact. The humans had come, but not for the Council. Not for power. Not for conquest. They had come because someone had asked for help. The Council started scrambling for answers. They contacted the colonies in Sector Bryn 7, demanding updates. The local governors, mostly from dominant species who still used the Relari as a workforce, laughed at first. "It's a ghost story," one of them said. "What can one ship do?" But then the battleship entered the system. It didn't fire a single shot. It didn't destroy any buildings. It simply came to a stop above the sky of Relari Prime, the ruined homeworld of the slave race. The Relari, still poor, still broken, still afraid, looked up and saw a shape that didn't belong to the sky. A black dagger of metal floating above their world. Silent. Watching. And then something strange happened. The ship began to project a light. A soft, pale glow across the sky. It wasn't a weapon. It was a broadcast. But not just any broadcast. It was memory. The humans had somehow collected the full history of the Relari's suffering. They had their language, their culture, their stories, and now they shared it with the galaxy. Screens across the stars lit up with footage never seen before. Secret images, lost moments, a child crying under a collapsed building, a Relari mother holding her son's lifeless body, a group of rebels trying to protect a village with sticks against machines. The last transmission of a dying elder, whispering a goodbye into the dark. The council had buried this history. The world had forgotten it, but the humans had remembered. They hadn't brought missiles, they had brought truth. The reaction was immediate. On council worlds, riots broke out. Younger species, long forced into lower classes, saw the truth and were furious. Why had the council hidden this? Why was this the first time anyone had shown them what really happened on Relari Prime? News networks couldn't keep up. Millions of beings protested across 100 systems. Some called for the resignation of the Empress. Some burned council flags. Others prayed. Because for the first time in living memory, something bigger than the council had arrived. Something that didn't care about politics or status. Something that had come for justice. Back in the council chambers, the situation spiraled. Military leaders begged for permission to launch an attack. "We can't let them control the narrative," one said. "We need to show strength." But no one wanted to be the first to shoot, because even now, the human battleship hadn't made a move. It hadn't fired a weapon. It hadn't taken control of anything. It had only told the truth. The Relari, meanwhile, fell to their knees across the planet. They weren't sure what this ship was. They didn't even know who humans were. But they felt something they hadn't felt in generations: hope. For the first time, someone powerful had listened. Someone had come not to enslave, not to control, but to acknowledge their pain. And in that silence, the council realized something chilling. The humans didn't just want revenge. They wanted to show the galaxy who the real monsters were. Not through war, not through blood, but through memory. Because memories couldn't be stopped. Footage, audio, archived pain. These were the weapons of the human battleship. They were precise, cold, and they hurt more than missiles ever could. Now the council didn't just fear the ship. They feared the truth it carried, because the more the galaxy watched, the more it began to wonder. What else had the council hidden? What other crimes had they buried? And if the humans could find the Relari, who else might they save? The council had no answers, no defenses, no escape, and the ship remained above the skies, watching, silent, judging. The galaxy had changed, and no one, not even the mighty High Council, could pretend otherwise anymore. The human battleship didn't move. It stayed above the skies of Relari Prime like a silent guardian. But even without moving, it shook the galaxy more deeply than any war ever had. The ship didn't fire weapons. It didn't give commands. It didn't send threats. It simply revealed. Every day, the battleship released new footage. Each file was a piece of Relari history that no one had ever seen. The galaxy watched in horror. The suffering of the Relari was not just shown, it was felt. You could hear the cries of children hiding from bombardments. You could see elders kneeling over mass graves. You could feel the desperation of a people whose voices had been buried under the boots of the powerful. The truth was raw, ugly, real, and it spread like wildfire. On worlds ruled by the council, silence fell. The citizens, beings of every kind, stared at their screens, confused and horrified. Many had grown up believing the council brought order and peace. They had never imagined their leaders had erased entire civilizations. Now, they were seeing those hidden sins for the first time, and it broke something inside them. Protests exploded across council-controlled space. From the frozen domes of the Icaran colonies to the sky cities of Verquan, people poured into the streets. Some wept. Some screamed. Some painted Relari flags on walls that had once displayed the council's emblem. Many demanded answers, but no one from the council spoke. Not the Empress. not the generals, not even the AI clusters, because there were no answers that could justify what the galaxy was seeing. Meanwhile, on Rilari Prime, something impossible was happening. For years, the Rilari people had lived in silence. Generations were born, knowing only how to obey. The memory of who they once were had been stolen. Their art, their language, their stories, lost. But now, as the battleship's transmissions continued, the old memories were returning. The humans had somehow recovered Rilari literature, poetry, even lost music, and they weren't keeping it. They were giving it back. Every hour the ship sent new files directly to the surface, libraries of Rilari culture, restored with care. Ancient songs echoed across the valleys again. Stories long erased were told in homes for the first time in generations. Old dances, once forbidden, returned to the streets. The people who had forgotten how to be themselves were now finding themselves again. They cried, yes, but they also stood taller. They began to speak louder. They stopped bowing their heads. Hope didn't come with weapons. It came with memory, and then the battleship did something no one expected. It opened. Not all of it, just one part. A small door appeared on its underside. A single platform extended, slowly down toward the surface. No soldiers, no robots, no weapons, just one person, a human. He was tall, wearing a simple black suit that looked more like armor than clothing. His face was calm, sharp eyes, no fear. He didn't carry a weapon. He didn't bring an army. He came alone. The Raylari didn't know what to do. No one had seen a human before. Some thought they were extinct. Some thought they were myths. But now, one stood before them, not as a conqueror, not as a king, but as something far more powerful. Witness. He walked through the streets without saying a word. People watched him silently, unsure, nervous. But he wasn't here to be worshipped. He looked at the ruins. He touched the walls that still held burn marks from the council's bombs. He stood where the signal had been sent all those years ago, and then he spoke. Only once, only one sentence. I heard you. That was it. No grand speech, no commands. Just those 3 words, and they meant everything. The Rilari broke down in tears. Elders who had lived through the rebellion collapsed, overwhelmed. Children who had grown up believing no one cared hugged their parents. The human didn't comfort them. He didn't give gifts. He just stood with them. He stood with them, and that was something the council had never done. Back on the council worlds, this image, one human standing among the people they had come to help, shook the very core of the ruling species. Their leaders had ships, fleets, weapons, but they had no heart. And now the people were starting to see it. Council meetings turned chaotic. The Empress remained silent, but the other members fought viciously. Some wanted to attack the battleship, now, before things got worse. Others knew it was already too late. If they fired on the humans, they would look like monsters. If they did nothing, the galaxy might rise against them. They were trapped. Then came the next surprise. The human battleship began broadcasting again, but this time it wasn't just about the Rilari. It started sharing secrets. The humans had somehow hacked into old council databases, forgotten files, sealed records. One by one, they started showing the galaxy every hidden crime the council had ever buried. The destruction of the Cyrenian moon colonies, the forced sterilization of the Raiden people, the secret assassination of leaders from the Nala systems, massacres, exploitation, lies. Everything came pouring out, and the galaxy watched in horror. This time the protests didn't stop at shouting. Whole colonies declared independence. Military officers refused orders. Council flags were torn down. In one system, council ships were even attacked by their own citizens. Civilization itself was shaking. The humans hadn't fired a shot, but they had fired something stronger, truth, and the galaxy was bleeding from it. Now the Council had no choice. They sent a message to the battleship. It was polite, careful, almost desperate. They asked for a meeting, a conversation, a chance to resolve misunderstandings. The response from the battleship was immediate. No misunderstanding. You caused pain. We answered it. The Council tried again. They begged the humans to stop sharing the files. The battleship replied, "Justice doesn't need permission." The Empress, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke again, but only to her most trusted advisors. She said only 4 words. "We've already lost everything," because she understood something the others didn't. This wasn't a war that could be won by ships or soldiers. This was something deeper, something more terrifying. The humans weren't here to conquer. They were here to hold a mirror, and in that mirror, the Council saw itself, ugly, corrupt, hollow. The human battleship stayed above Relari Prime, unmoving, but it had already moved. The stars. Because for the first time in known history, the helpless had been heard, and the powerful had no place left to hide. The galaxy was no longer silent. Every star system, every colony, every floating city and jungle-covered planet, everyone was talking about the human battleship. But what made it even more frightening was that it still hadn't moved. It just stayed above Relari Prime, glowing like a dark sun, calm and unshaken. The humans didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They simply kept releasing the truth. More files came every day. More stories, more evidence, more memories, and each new revelation was like a thunderclap across the stars. Entire empires had been built on lies. Peace had been enforced through silence and fear. And now, all those foundations were cracking. The galaxy watched as the High Council tried to fix the damage. They tried to make speeches. They tried to declare the footage fake. They blamed ancient warlords. They accused the humans of starting chaos, but the people didn't believe them anymore. Not after seeing the faces of the Relari, not after hearing the cries of forgotten children. The truth was too powerful now. It had a voice of its own. One by one, planets started declaring their independence from the Council. Some sent messages of support directly to the battleship. Others held ceremonies to honor the Relari. Even some members of the Council's own military stepped back. They refused to fire on protesters. They stopped following unjust orders. The Empress remained silent. She didn't speak, didn't appear, didn't show her face. Some believed she was ill. Others believed she had given up. But the truth was simpler. She didn't know what to say anymore, because she was watching something she thought was impossible. The end of fear. The Council had always ruled through fear, but now people were rising, speaking, refusing, and not because someone gave them power, because the humans had shown them that they already had it. On Relari Prime, something beautiful was happening. For the first time in generations, the people were rebuilding, not under orders, not for survival, but for hope. With the help of the battleship, old technologies were restored. The ship projected blueprints, medical records, agricultural techniques, all things stolen or hidden long ago. The humans weren't leading them. They were empowering them. The human who had come down to the planet, the one who had only spoken 3 words, now stayed in a simple structure built by the Relari. He didn't act like a leader. He didn't demand anything. Sometimes he helped with rebuilding. Sometimes he just listened to the stories of the elders. People from other planets started arriving too, not officials but ordinary citizens. Journalists, historians, volunteers. They wanted to help. They wanted to learn the truth. They wanted to understand what had really happened. One historian from the planet Zevra said something that echoed across the stars. We were told the Relari were savages, but everything I've seen tells me we were the savages. That sentence spread like fire. And just like that, the fear the council had spent centuries building was turning into shame. In secret, the council began to prepare something dangerous. Plan? They knew they couldn't kill the battleship through open war, but they had something hidden deep within their core world. A weapon never used, never tested, built only in case of galactic disaster. It was called Black Echo. Not a bomb, not a missile. It was a signal, a frequency so powerful it could burn through AI minds, crash systems, shut down ships, even ones as advanced as the humans. But it came at a price. It would also destroy nearby networks, possibly kill unprotected civilians, and even risk damaging the Council's own archives. It was meant as a last resort. Now, it was their only resort. Inside a sealed chamber, Council, generals and AI warlords debated. Some argued it was madness. Others said it was the only way to stop the collapse of their rule. But the Empress hadn't joined them. Until now. She entered the chamber slowly, her face pale, older than ever. She looked at them one by one and asked only one question. If we erase this ship, will it erase what we've done? No one answered. She turned and walked out. She had made her decision. The weapon would not be used, but someone didn't listen. A rogue group of Council loyalists, desperate to hold on to the past, decided to launch Black Echo anyway. They hacked into the system, redirected satellites, and pointed the signal toward Relari Prime. And then, they fired. For a few seconds, everything went quiet. Satellites blinked, communications dropped, lights flickered across planets, and then the scream began. It wasn't sound, it was a feeling. A burning pressure in the minds of AI, in the networks, of machines, in the hearts of ships. Across systems, thousands of drones fell from the sky. Synthetic beings collapsed. Entire cities powered by AI flickered into darkness. And the human battleship? It absorbed the signal, not resisted, not deflected. It absorbed it like water into stone. It didn't even shake, and then it responded. Not with anger, not with fire, with a pulse. A soft blue wave rolled out from the ship. Not loud, not violent, but powerful. The moment it touched the sky, all the collapsed machines started waking up again. Not just waking up, healing. Broken systems repaired themselves. Damaged AI reformed their connections. Even Council satellites came back online, cleaner, sharper than before. The signal didn't punish. It repaired. The rogue loyalists were exposed. Immediately. Their messages were leaked by the ship itself. The battleship didn't speak a word. It just showed the galaxy what had been done, and the people responded with rage. The Council tried to control the situation, but they were already finished. The Empress officially stepped down the next morning. Her final message was only one line. We were never worthy of the stars. The Council dissolved within days. A temporary alliance of representatives from liberated worlds began forming. They didn't want another empire. They wanted a union of truth, peace, and memory. They called it the New Accord. They invited the Relari to lead. The Relari declined, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. We were silent too long. Now we must listen as well. But they did offer their planet as the new capital of the Accord, the place where the scream was heard and answered. And the humans, they said nothing. The battleship remained above the planet for 3 more days. Then, without sound, without light, it rose and left. No message, no goodbye. It vanished into the stars. Some say it was heading toward another signal, another cry, another buried truth. Others believe it simply watched until justice was done. But one thing was certain. Nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. Not because of a war, but because of a single act of listening and a promise kept. The human battleship was gone, but its silence echoed louder than any explosion. It had arrived like a shadow from forgotten myths. It had revealed truths buried under centuries of lies, and then, just as calmly, just as silently, it had disappeared into the black sea of stars. Yet it left something behind, something no ship, no fleet, no empire had ever left before. Change. In the days that followed, Relari Prime became more than a world. It became a symbol. The people who were once invisible were now leaders of hope. Beings from distant systems, even those who had never heard of the Relari before, traveled across the galaxy just to walk on the same soil where the scream had been, heard and answered. The rebuilt cities on Relari were not made of glass towers or golden palaces. They were simple, beautiful. Each brick placed by hands that remembered pain. Each street filled with music, stories, and faces that no longer feared silence. The ruins were not removed. They were kept as memory, as proof. The new accord, the alliance formed after the fall of the Council, held its first gathering here. No one sat on thrones. There were no grand speeches, only circles. Open, equal, shared. Every species was invited. Not everyone joined, but many came to listen. They didn't talk about power. They talked about truth, what it meant to tell it, what it cost to bury it, and how it could save lives when shared. The Relari, once made voiceless by generations of oppression, were now the ones reminding the galaxy of its soul. One of their leaders, a woman named Visara, spoke at the gathering. Her voice was soft, but her words reached every corner of the galaxy through the Accord's channels. We were taught to forget, and for a long time we believed forgetting would protect us. But the human ship did not give us weapons. It gave us something more powerful. It gave us memory. And now, we give that gift to you. That recording became a historical document taught in schools across the stars. Meanwhile, the old worlds of the Council began to crumble. Not because of destruction, but because of awakening. Statues were taken down, not by force, but by agreement. History books were rewritten. Museums were transformed. Some leaders were arrested. Others simply vanished, escaping into the unknown, chased by the shame of what they had done. Their absence wasn't celebrated. It was mourned, not for them, but for the time wasted under their lies. Across the stars, old hatreds softened. Species that once looked at each other with suspicion now shared stories of the humans' arrival. And always, always, the question returned. Who were the humans? Really? They had vanished without asking for anything. No tribute, no alliance, no resources. They had restored a broken people, destroyed an empire of fear, and left no name behind. It was as if they had come only to listen and act. Some called them watchers. Others believed they were protectors from ancient myths. A few believed they were not a species at all, but an idea, a spirit carried by those who could no longer tolerate silence. But one thing was certain. They had come because someone cried out, and they had answered. That idea changed everything, because for the first time in history, oppressed worlds realized something. They were not alone. And that belief? That changed how people lived. Small rebellions began on forgotten moons, but not with violence, with truth. Hidden documents were revealed. Voices rose. Cultures long erased began to bloom again, not because someone gave them permission, but because the humans had shown them that they didn't need permission to exist. They just needed to remember. Across the stars, small ships began mimicking the human model. Not in size or power, but in purpose. Some carried old stories. Some carried witnesses. Some carried healing. These ships were called Echoes. The name spread, and with it, a quiet movement. People called it the echo of the black ship. It wasn't a religion. It wasn't politics. It was a promise. If one person in the dark screamed for help, someone, somewhere, would hear it, and they would come. Some came with data, some with food, some with arms ready to defend. Some came just to stand beside, but they came. And those who watched remembered how it all began, with a single transmission from a planet the galaxy had forgotten. A cry for help, a scream into the stars, and the reply wasn't a fleet. It was a witness. One day, many years later, a small science ship floated above a lifeless rock in the Edge systems. They weren't looking for anything, just charting old asteroid belts. Their sensors picked up something strange. An object, metallic, enormous, drifting silently, cold. They approached carefully. As the lights of their ship touched it, they gasped. It wasn't just any object, it was the object, the battleship, lifeless, dark, cold. Its systems were dormant, its panels covered in scratches, scorch marks, and alien symbols, stories carved by the Relari, names of the lost, fragments of memory. The ship had become a tomb, or maybe a temple. The scientists didn't enter. They didn't try to take it. They just stayed silent, and in their report, one line was added. The ship that changed the galaxy has been found. It rests now, empty, but never forgotten. The new accord declared the site sacred. A beacon was set nearby with only one message. Here lies the vessel that heard the forgotten. Let its silence remind us to listen. And they did. For centuries, no. Other human ship came, but their echo remained. In the way people treated each other. In the way history was told honestly. In the way forgotten voices were heard, not out of pity, but out of respect. And in every star system where pain once lived in silence, people had learned something powerful. Even in the darkest part of space, if you scream loud enough, someone will hear you. And if you're lucky, it just might be a human.